I have a really special guest, Lynne. And Lynne, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, for sure. So, just so the audience knows, this is my typical fashion. I usually somehow have met someone that I thought was interesting and then I invite them on the hiring room. And Lynn and I met recently at the Christmas party and I was sponsoring it. And we just kind of sat, we were sitting next to each other eating Mexican food, having some chips and salsa. And we just started chit-chatting. And by the way, Lynn, your
Huh?
advice about the IDES where you have
Uh-huh.
to go on the website for the unemployed, where people who are unemployed and only have to they have to upload their profile to collect unemployment. So I went and told the client that, and they hadn't done that yet. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
So it was a good idea. So Lynn is like full of ideas because you're director of human resources, correct?
Yes.
And you recently changed. So you're at a company called
Trigon America.
Trigon America. And you only
Yep.
been there a couple months, right? So what does Trigon do?
So we make medical parts for the orthopedic industry for used in the surgeries of hips, knees, shoulders, the different joints. So it's really cool. I actually was with the company about years ago, back in 2021, and then it changed ownership, and then there was some downsizing. They came back to me. They remembered me. My current boss I worked with for 3 weeks, because the current owners
And
bought
they
the
remember you.
company.
See, you're a
Yeah.
see, Lynn. Lynn's a great hire.
Yeah, they remembered me, and they reached out to me. They were like, we talked a phone call while I was out in Michigan, and then I came on site, and it just, it was my time for my promotion. So,
Yay! Well,
yeah,
it couldn't happen to a nicer person. Well, see, that's a
thank
great
you.
recruiting story, right? The best people to hire are people that worked for you in the past or through your network.
Yeah.
That's the first place you go to before you call me. But you can still call me. I'm just saying, like, that's the best place. So one of the things that Lynn and I bonded over was, I often say this, sometimes human resources inherit recruiting and some people have experience with it and some people don't. Lynn's got a pretty robust background in recruiting. We were kind of comparing some things. We were eating our chips and salsa and she was like showing me texts and things she did. And she gave me some other ideas, which was great. So what's interesting is you've spent some time in some complex manufacturing environments.
Hmm.
And so with that, you're kind of hiring at a lot of different levels, right? It's very different than like a professional services environment. So yeah,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about and union too.
Hmm.
You've also been in union and a lot of regulations. So what drew you to manufacturing?
So, I had in the past a big box retail and then distribution background. So over with knowing the area and the market area, but manufacturing is one, I actually got into it because recruiters were saying, Lynn, you don't have this specific software. These companies want that software. So my
Interesting. Which
first
software was it?
yeah, it
Which
was
software?
ADP software. So I had PeopleSoft, I had some other softwares, but
Really?
that time of the market, there was a lot of candidates, and they were like, "Well, this company, company X, they want someone with ADP. They don't want to have to teach someone the
So
software." And I'm like, "Okay."
you were losing out on opportunities because of
I
one.
was.
I hate when that happens. I think
Yep. So in my path of my career, I actually took a step down in position to a pay
really
HR and payroll administrator in manufacturing to get into manufacturing to be able to get, because they had the ADP software. But I got to tell you, that step down got me so much more. It got me the
interesting.
manufacturing experience
Okay.
that got me my contract negotiations. I got put in charge of the two staffing agencies with updating contracts. I got put in charge of making sure that the vending company, that we changed out the vending machines, negotiating what type. The cleaning company, we had negotiating and changing out the cleaning company to a new one. So those skills that, would be at a manager or a senior level, I was
Yeah.
doing that for that site. So getting that experience. And then that's where I got my step into lean manufacturing, my Lean Six Sigma side that I love. So 8D problem solving. I just learning value stream mapping, and they're like, "Hey, you're on this VSM class, project that we're
Yeah.
doing." And the company I was with, every quarter they do a project. Well, company wide, our project came in third. So to be a part of that and to start the process to learn about Lean Six Sigma and everything, it opened up that whole other world. It opened up, I got my certifications for
Yeah, I
quality
saw that.
management, team
Now
leader,
is that
inter
usual in human resources or sort of
no,
unusual?
no,
Right,
I
because
gotta
you
tell
think
you,
of it
when
as
I
it's operations, right? Like,
it is
yes.
operation. It's actually quality managers and quality engineering. It
Yeah.
was a week-long program, and I went to that class, and it was a conference, it was on site at their place, but I'd say there was about 20 people or so there,
Yeah.
and everybody's introducing themselves. They're like, "I'm quality engineer, I'm quality, manager," and I raise my hand, it comes to me, and I'm like, "Well, I'm HR payroll administrator."
And they're like, "What?"
So, but I was signed up and sent to that class because I was doing process compliance audits and having to do the Foursquare with typing up the compliance and getting that. So I was already learning that process, but then they wanted me to be certified so that way then they can say, hey, she just because she's HR doesn't mean she doesn't understand quality.
Well, yeah, like, you're just not trained in it, doesn't mean that you can't understand it. So what size company 2 questions. What size company was that? I know you don't like to mention names, so what size was that, and what did they manufacture?
So they were global manufacturer in the automobile industry.
Okay. So they
That
were pretty big?
company, they're pretty decent. That company would they made, I'll say carbon canisters. That facility, that site itself ultimately closed, but it was one that, at that time, there was 3 shifts, and there was
Okay.
about 100 people on site.
Okay.
When I do my compliance audits, I would be on second shift or third shift,
Yeah.
same thing just on the HR side too. When it came to open enrollment for benefits, I'd work second or third shift and,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was
It's a different world. It's a very
it
manufacturing's
is.
a very different world. Now was that a union shop or not?
No.
So
No,
that wasn't your union deal. Okay.
no, until 3.5 years ago, all of my experience was non-union.
Well, I don't think people know this. I didn't know this till I was recruiting for a union company
Mhm.
and union company, union shop, and I don't remember what role we were recruiting for. I mean, was it ops? Was it no, it was an HR. It was an
Mhm.
HR role, and they wanted someone who has union experience. So we were
Yeah.
going in the area and we were looking at manufacturing plants that were unionized, right? Because you're trying to find people who worked in those environments. And
Yeah.
only 10% of manufacturing plants in the country are union. I was shocked at
Yep.
that. And
Yep.
so you have a small pool of HR people who know union. So it's a good resume builder or a career
Mhm.
builder to have that experience in a union shop because it's a whole different ballgame.
It is, and that was one. So with my path, because I had, you think over for yourself of where you
Yeah.
see yourself in the long-term growth. And out of my scope of everything, unions for the HR side was the only piece that I was missing.
Yeah.
And that was one of my goals when I was applying and got my step up back into the regional level. I took my step up, which great experience, you know, and I jumped, I would say, into the deep end. One facility with 3 unions, 3 different contracts, each 3 of the departments,
Wow.
the different departments. We had a non-union department too. So, and then one other site that was union.
How did you have 3 different union contracts
They
for sites?
just
Because they were
they had been established years and years ago,
yeah.
and, we had production for one union, the maintenance for another union, and the shipping and receiving was a different. So there were three separate unions, separate contracts, and then the
My
non-union.
gosh, that sounds like a
Yeah.
nightmare.
You just had to read, and before you gave an answer, you double checked,
You had to read
and then
again.
you ultimately memorized.
How did they handle, like, benefits with that? Like, what were the things that were different? I'm just fascinated by this.
Yeah.
What are the things that were different with the contracts?
So there were some similarities, but it could have been the difference between the life insurance, difference between short-term disability
Wow.
amounts, difference
Okay.
between the PTO, vacation, things like that.
Gosh.
It really just depended on, when the contracts were enacted, what the increases were,
Yeah.
because each one was handled as a separate thing. So it really was okay. You remember, a lot of it. I ultimately memorized.
Right.
These are the contracts, and you went back and referenced. But like open enrollment, we did separate open enrollment training sessions.
Oh my
And
gosh. What a
one of the
nightmare.
things, yeah, and one of the things with manufacturing, the line doesn't stop. You
Right.
know,
No.
distribution, the truck can sit and wait at the
Yeah.
loading dock or
It's expensive
but
for that line to stop.
yeah.
Yeah.
So open enrollment, first shift, whether it started at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., you're doing your benefit open
Yeah.
enrollment for first shift at 5 or 6 a.m., the hour
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And then third shift, when they get off at that 6 or 7 a.m., they're staying for their benefit session.
Now
So
that could get a little tricky with hiring. I think about when you're interviewing some, you gotta make sure you know what you got different rates, you have different contracts, you've got different benefits.
So that it depends on the company. So
Yeah.
the managers, they knew their amounts and that.
Yeah.
Myself, I didn't have to interview the hourly associates. I did
Okay.
part of the interview. I was like one of the last to
Yeah.
be hired for the salaried. It went through the manager, the
Got it.
on-site, the VP, and then
Okay.
HR was a part of that interview process for all the salaried. But then we actually had a recruiter, and they're the ones that would do the offer letter, and they communicated the pay. Now the manager
Okay.
in the interview, for the next year X is the dollar amount, so they ultimately memorize that.
So that
Production is
wasn't
that.
confusing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So it's
were the managers doing the first interview then?
well, the recruiter would do the pre-screen over the
On the
phone
phone?
and see if it would be a fit, and if it would, then they would automatically schedule the manager. And that was one of the things, the recruiters that I had, I set them up with, here's the managers, here's the pay rates, and they knew, they would do that initial talk with the manager if they weren't familiar with them.
Right.
Do you want me to just put the person on your calendar, or do you want to see the resume first? So that was the whole recruiting side of things.
Okay.
But that goes into like the multi sites, with the recruiters.
Right.
They knew that my expectation was every email, every Outlook appointment, I would be included on. I'd be CC'd or I'd be added
So
to.
you knew it was
Because
happening?
I knew what was happening, and then I'm the one that there were some things that I would do on my side of HR to make sure the new hires knew me, and I could be asked at any point in time. We had biweekly recruiting calls, what's going on with this position?
Right, of
This
course.
position not being filled, or the manager could say, well, we've only had 2 interviews. So I used my Outlook calendar, and every interview scheduled, I colored recruiting was purple. So if you asked me in the course of my day, where did the time go? I could look at my calendar and I could say, well, there's like 10 interviews, and 2 are in this state, and 4 are in this state,
Yeah.
and 3 are at this level. So it's using those tools and resources that you have, so that way then you could, if you were asked or if someone questioned, well, you just have to click and open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you so one of the things I always find interesting is that when you're doing multi-state or multi-locations like you've done,
Mhm.
how do you maintain that consistency in the culture? Because you have, like, different leaders at different sites and different feels, like, it feels different it could feel differently, right? Especially if you have something like East Coast and West Coast or Midwest versus West Coast, like, very different, just different. The regions are very different with the people that move to those areas, like, so how did you create, like, consistency with leadership?
So one of the things I did, and I'll go back to my armored car industry side because that was the
Okay.
regional one, and I had expectations. I had to go visit every quarter and things like that. Uh, I would take my branch manager out during my visit. We'd go out to lunch, whether it was Subway or whatever, but we had time, half hour, an hour, to sit and talk, and just to talk with them. So spending that little bit of time, but one of the best things that I did over, and I still do it now, is I spent time out on the floor. I'll stick with the armored car industry because I'm going down that example. But I would be there for when the route went out. so
You
I
know
could
what, Lynn?
see.
People don't do that. You're very
No.
unique. My husband's a plant manager, been a plant manager for 30 years. He would hug you if you came out to the plant. He'd be so excited, be like, "Oh my God, thank you," because this is where
Mhm.
everything is happening, right? And that's
Yeah.
where you can really get, credibility and build those relationships. So, kudos to you on that.
Yeah. And that was something, it's just over the years, you go back into my retail side. Lunchtime, I would be at the checkout cash register checking out so that the cashier could go on their lunch. If I was doing, I
Yeah.
rotated every other weekend. So after payroll was done, I'd be at the customer service desk so I have never expected an employee to do something that I wouldn't do.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, here with medical manufacturing, I can't make the parts. I'm not CNC.
You're not making some hip
No,
parts. I
no,
got you.
no. But in the past that I've stood beside the employee, I've looked at the part, I've asked them questions.
Yeah.
And so, you look at the paperwork. Well, what's a micrometer? It's that talking and finding out what their duties are, or just
Right.
and it's not like an hour quizzing. Today I could go out and I walk around and like, oh, what's this piece? And
Yeah.
then 2-3 days later, you see, so you pick up a little bit
Yeah.
here and there. So that
Well,
way then you can learn the business without physically doing it. Now, I will say on the armored car side, I actually went out on a route, took my lunch bag and sat in the third seat and went out on route, and I did the cash. I learned the vault. So with the
that's
processing and the
wild.
paperwork,
Were you
you know,
packing? Were you packing any heat?
No, 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 no. I was in the
No.
back. But that gave me the experience. So, it helped out tremendously over the years when I was there, because whenever an employee, oh, this person, whatever, they'd have a complaint,
Yeah.
I had the idea of what their daily duties were. And then I could, well, did you ask this or what, I could ask
Yeah.
those follow-up questions, or I could go to the crew chief or go to the branch manager with, hey, I got this issue, how's this going? And it helps on the HR piece. So that way then, you're not I love to have knowledge. So I'd
Well, and
rather learn.
I often talk about this, and I think I told you, I don't, did I think I told you I'm building a 6-week
Mhm. Yeah.
cohort on the entire ecosystem of hiring, from the first conversation to the hiring offer. And I wish every person in the world would go to it, of course. I'm sure that's not going to happen. But one of the basis, some of the underlining thread of it is be able to tell a compelling story.
Mhm.
So you going to the floor and understanding what they actually do is a heck of a lot different presentation than saying, here's the job description,
Mhm.
and saying like, I
Mhm.
don't really know, like I'm not like I don't really know how you
Yeah.
do it. No, now you can paint a different picture and you can tell a story that's much more like colorful, which is
Mhm.
impactful when you're recruiting.
Yeah.
It's the
And when
difference between people being interested and not being interested,
definitely, like,
right?
for Phoenix, my morning, the start of the day, I was over in the vault and handing out the keys. I
Yeah.
did the portion that I could do, or the portion that I was able to. When I was out at my Minnesota site, that facility, Illinois, you had to have a Class C license, but Minnesota you didn't. So the safety person, I did a road test so that I could,
So you
no,
drove it.
I didn't go out on the road. No, I went
No, you
like in
did.
the little parking lot. you know so I so, so it's things like that to understand, okay, well, you can't speed in the line of sight. But
Right.
those
Yeah.
little pieces. And one of the other things I did was I called them new hire conversations. So after a person got to a certain tenure, 2 weeks, a month, with return turnover and retention, I had a list of questions that was just, hey, how is everything going? Who has been helpful for you? Who's been your mentor? And those are, some of those, you would think that they're simple questions, but it identified for me that I could go to the branch manager and say, hey, this person is not communicating. Are they the right person to mentor the new hire? Hey, this person's telling me
Smart.
that they still don't have their uniforms. It's been 3 weeks. Where are their,
Yeah.
and getting that,
Yeah.
helping to identify who's the right mentor to put with the new hire.
Yeah.
Some of the other things, especially with being, if you're not on site every time, every facility, that I had, there was a poster of my name, my picture, my
There's
contact
Lynn.
information. Yeah,
Contact Lynn.
in the break room. But then I didn't just stop there. And I still do it now with changing over, I'm on site every time, but I did welcome emails.
That's so
And
nice. Okay.
I would yeah, and that's part of with recruiting, attaching me to everything, yeah, okay, recruiting sends the manager, "Hey, this person's gonna start this day." But I took the time, I create an Outlook appointment for the manager, and I put who they are and when they're starting. And it could, someone gives 2 weeks notice, you're putting an appointment out for 2 weeks in advance.
Yeah.
But I put it on their calendar so that they know when they're coming in.
Yeah.
And then it was every Friday, whoever was starting that next week, I had a template email that I created, welcome. I had it customized. So now it says, welcome to Trigon America. We look forward to seeing you. Your
Yeah.
orientation date and
Yeah.
time is. I attached the benefit book. We attached the little 401k information. I tell them, here's what to bring for your first day. I give them the list of acceptable documents for the I-9. We do direct
Yeah.
deposit. Bring your checking, and I tell them, we look forward to seeing you, and where to arrive, and so they have my information before they even show up.
And I think that's critical. What do you do?
Mhm.
So, here's what I understand from my years of experience. The first 90 days are really tough on people because they don't feel like they can speak up. Onboarding across the board, I think, in corporate America is kind of suck. It's not done very well, I think, overall. And so, giving them a good launching pad is
Mhm.
really important. What do you do after the 90 days? Do you touch base in 6 months, in 12 months? What do you do there?
So now with being on site, I can see them anytime. I can talk with them. I can walk up to them, say, "Hey, how are you doing?
Do
How's
you do it?
everything
Because a lot of
going?"
people don't. A lot of people get
Yeah,
stay in that office. Don't do
no,
anything.
no, no. Last week I was talking to my IT guy, and we got on to where he's going for vacation for Christmas
Right.
week, and all that. And it's that personable side instead of just, asking them one or two. It's getting them to open up, and it just
Yeah.
really depends on the person. One
Yeah.
person could be one question, another person could be something else. But I would say one of the key things is being observant before, especially being a new HR going into a new company.
Yeah.
When I came back, one of my guys, my first week, I went out on the floor and I walked around, and one of the guys is like, "Lynn," and I get a hug from him, and he's like, "You're back," and I'm like, "I am."
That's so nice.
So being open, but it's that communication piece that
Yeah.
you're a person too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless confidential, my door is open. So that way, then someone walking by, they got a basic question. And it might not be, my question. It might be, well, who do I turn my time off request into?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they at least know I'm out there to where I can't, I can answer for them, or at least point them in the direction.
Have you had any, like, really sticky conversations in your career where you were kinda caught between representing the employee and representing the employer? I always think that's tough for HR, right? Like, you're supposed to be an open door for the employees to come in and you're supposed to help them, but
Hmm.
then you're caught with, I think it's more political than anything else, right? Making right? And then yet you've gotta protect the company. I think it's a very tough spot sometimes, you know?
It can be, but usually those situations,
Yeah.
it's involves some kind of issue, and I'm on the investigation side. And I've been complimented on my investigations over the years. I asked the who, what, where, when, why, and how. If it's a non-union facility, depending on the level of the issue, the manager or the supervisor would sit in and they would just observe. So that way, then, if there was questions or issues, the union facility, the union steward would sit in on
Yeah, the
every
union's a
every
whole different
event.
ballgame.
It is.
There's a
Yeah.
grievance, right? The
Yep.
grievance process.
Yep.
There's a lot of
Yep.
people involved that very different than a
It
non-union,
yeah.
'cause
But it's there still was
there's a
similarities.
process that has to take place, but the thing that's different though in union, to your point, you have a
Mhm.
union steward, you have someone representing the employer,
Mhm.
excuse me, representing the
Employee.
employee. It can pit people, but when it's a little, the lines are a little clearer with that because they have like a process that represents the employee, and the employer, whatever, reacts or whatever. But when you're in a non-union,
Mhm.
I think it gets a little dicier because things are a little grayer about that, you know? Have you
Well,
ever found, and maybe this is a completely unfair question. Do you ever, I'm just trying to think that, have you ever seen when you investigate,
mhm.
is it typically 2 sides to the story? Is it mostly miscommunication? Like, is there any pattern that you see? Let's say take the really egregious stuff out of there, like someone just being a bully or being abusive. Let's leave that out. But, like, let's look at the mainstream. Did you ever see any patterns with it? Because people are pretty predictable. People's
Well,
patterns are pretty
I
predictable,
I always say there's 3 sides to the story. There each party side and then what meets in the middle that you can validate of both. So,
right?
there can be, and I think a lot of that is understanding the managers and that, my associates, I've had where people have lied to me and the witnesses have been able to prove it. But that's where I look at when I do an investigation. Who are the parties involved? Who potentially could be around that have heard it or not? If both parties usually say if someone was in the area, so now I got an eyewitness or someone that, you know, on manufacturing, any kind of industry, you then have to look at, okay, are they standing beside a machine that's loud? Is a forklift driving by? Just because someone's
Right.
perception, oh, they're yelling at me. Okay, well, if they're standing right there beside the forklift
They
loading up
can't
the
hear.
truck, yeah,
Yeah.
can they hear? Do they have to wear PPE? Do they have to have hearing protection in? Then you got to
Yeah.
go, well, what was their mannerisms and were they, I talk sometimes with my hands and so were they, how were they acting? Were they, and I've gone to, well, how close were they standing to you? And, things like that,
Yeah.
because you have to try and I always say narrow down, but you gotta look at the full 360 of the issue because what was communicated might not be bad. But what the person was, how they were saying it, or did they go and storm up towards the person, or things, those
Yeah.
types of
Body
things that.
language is a big deal, right? I mean, body language is a big deal. I've had a guy stand over me, a really big guy, and I'm sitting down, he's standing over me, and I'm like,
Mhm.
you need to sit down."
Yeah.
Like, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was a very aggressive, physical stance,
Mhm.
using his, like, height and his, I don't say girth, but, like, his physical being as a man over me as a woman, and I was sitting, I was like, it was very dominating the way he did it. It didn't
Yeah.
go well, but I don't
Yeah.
get intimidated, so it didn't work. But he did it to other people that was intimidated and felt unsafe around this guy.
Mhm.
Like, you
And
can't
that's
do that.
though you experienced it yourself, so when
Yeah.
someone comes to you and says, "Hey, this person's doing this," you're like, "Check box. Yep, I've seen it. I've
Yeah,
done,
I've experienced, I
and
know exactly what you're talking about. Absolutely.
yeah,
He'll be like, "I don't mean it that way." It doesn't matter
no, it
because
doesn't.
that's how it's being perceived, and that's
Yes.
reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I always when I did, the harassment with joke telling, I'm like, it's the person on the receiving end. If they find it offensive, then it is.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a good point because there's a lot happening in those situations, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
emotion. What is your stance or your opinion on leadership development? And have you been involved with much of it in your career?
Actually have, even way back, big box retail for manager development. I think part of it is onus on the manager to want to learn,
Mm,
because we can get you whatever training courses. And like there's a company that I've done for myself with my PHR research credits, $299 a year for a membership, and you can take the courses. You can take up
mhm.
to two
Is
two
that
day in person.
That Fred Pryor stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's where I went to project management, one day class, 2-day classes. I've done,
Yeah.
so there's there's all different training things, but it's the person to actually take the course
Yeah.
and learn it. Because over
Right.
the years, I've dealt with performance improvement plans. We've gone with managed by walking around as a suggestion from one of the supervisors and explaining it to them, and they just didn't do it. And then there's
Yeah.
others that take it. You know, my one of my plant managers or store managers, like very on early on in my career, he was like, I want to be a store manager, and he was operations. I'm like, well, if you want to be that, well then here, and we did a gap analysis. I'm like, here's
Yeah.
what you need to do. You need to start leading the weekly manager meetings. You need to start sitting in on the conference calls. And like the next time the store manager training program came around, he applied for it. He got in, and he's still one of my personal references, and he's still a store manager,
Yeah.
and where he was promoted promoted to. And over the years, it's that those types of you can offer, but if
It's
they
like
don't want to
leading a horse to
participate.
water, but you can't make him drink, right? I mean, I saw that in my own career with people where there were times where I was like almost begging people to like, you see something where you know if they did this, how it could
Yes.
be transformational for them. And I were times where I was almost like begging someone, please do this. And if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it, you know?
Yeah, and one of my things that I gave one of my past recruiters, I told him, I'm like, "You need to take." So there's go Lean Six Sigma, the white belt, the yellow belt, and even, one of the ladies that now from our HRA meeting, 'cause randomly
Really?
sat by you, and then I randomly later on sat by someone else, so now I have an HR generalist that I'm mentoring now, and
Is
I went
that
over.
is that at the end when you were at the other end of the table and you were in
Yeah,
this discussion? I know, I was kind
yeah,
of waiting there. I was like, I want to say goodbye to Lynn, but yeah, you
yeah.
were in like some really deep they have
We
a mentoring program there. I should get involved in that.
Yeah. So now, yes, we're gonna meet on the 28th. We're gonna go through resume, portfolio. But anyways, so but one of the things I told her, and then I told my recruiter where I was last, was you need to take at a minimum the white belt of the Lean Six Sigma. Because as a recruiter, you are looking at resumes.
Yeah.
5S and things like that.
Yeah.
If you haven't worked in that area, you got to at least know the terminology.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go and get your full green belt, but like at a
No.
minimum, the white belt gives you,
Yeah.
here's what the words are, here's what they mean.
Yeah.
And then if in that was an 8-hour training course, and where I got
Yeah.
my from, I went to local community college because at that point that manufacturer that I was with, it was for free because they partnered with the community college. But then took the yellow belt where you learn you learn more in depth on the terminology. But that was also an 8-hour training course that you could start and stop, and you could go back and
It was like
review.
an evergreen. It was just recorded.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
So
evergreens are
that
yeah.
I would say definitely for recruiting is, if you don't understand the terminology that you're recruiting for, you don't understand,
Yeah,
because the
that's a
operator's
waste.
gonna say, I want X. And okay, that's great. But now as a recruiter, you need to at least understand a little bit about it. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but what
Right.
is mechatronics? What is,
But,
that?
you should be able to do that on a good intake too. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
and what I do, I work across multiple industries.
Yeah.
So I'm working with a manager. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And how does that
Mhm.
work? And what do you mean by that? And why is that important? I mean, you just have to ask really good questions and you can usually learn enough of it. And sometimes, I was doing some work in construction and I had got into the construction company through a referral because they needed a CFO after 20 years of someone was retiring. So we did that search and I became pretty close with the president from doing that
Mhm.
search together. And he'd say, he was like, can you do this? Can you do this for me? It was like construction operations. I was like, I don't know. And so we would go through and and sometimes the first couple of people I would say, okay, Henry, like,
Mhm.
am I off? Like, help me understand. And he would educate
Mhm.
me. And then it
Yeah.
didn't take that much to sort of figure it out, you know? And then we just got better. Now, like, I know exactly what he needs. So, that intake and getting feedback from that manager is just it's just invaluable,
It
and they need
is.
to take the time to talk to you because they want a good person. They need to explain it to you. You can't be an expert in freaking everything in your company in every position. I mean, it's ridiculous. You can't do that. You can understand the business. I think what I like about what you do, Lynn, is that you
Mhm.
think like a business person in
Mhm.
operations. And that makes you a very powerful HR person
Mhm.
because everything starts with understanding that business, right? And then your interviews are better, your recruiting's better, your hiring's better. Everything is just better when you have that kind of level of understanding, you know? So I think that's really great. So you are big on so you are big in the leadership training and things like that. When you walk in, do you kind of assess that? Tell me a little bit because I feel like it's very lacking out there. You know, people get promoted because they're technically good at something, right? So you
Mhm.
take, you take your best operator in manufacturing, you make them the plant manager, and all of a sudden they're managing 100 people as opposed to like 4 people, right? It's a
Yeah.
different ball game. And
It is.
and you're not they tend to like throw people in and learn by trial and error instead of like giving them a good formal education on like a guidance to it because there
Yeah,
could be a
and
lot of damage that's done, right?
it is, and usually so the larger the company, sometimes they have training programs.
Yeah.
Where I came from last, the new hire would come in and then they would mentor with someone for at least a week to 2 weeks before
Smart.
they went on. Yeah, and
That's
each
smart. Okay.
yeah. Yep. Hourly associates, and then that was with knowing each manager in each site. One site, they mentored on first shift because when they went to the second shift or the third shift, there wasn't as many support people. Plant manager's not going to be working the third shift
Right.
every day, so the new hires would come in and they would mentor for at least 1 week, and then if they weren't fully there yet, then they would stay a second week on first shift and then rotate in. So, and that was the same with my other sites, and also with having a mentor. Here we
Yeah.
do that too. It's
Do
what
you
do
have a
they
formal
need?
mentor program there or you just pair people up
Not yet.
depending on
not
what? Not
not yet.
you're like,
Not
I've only
yet.
been here 4
No.
months, Renee. I'm getting to
it's
it.
all it's only been 90 days.
90 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
But I
come
will
on.
say, so
You're superhuman, Lynn. Come
I
on. Get on
know.
it. Get
No,
cracking.
I actually, so I've already started that process though, because like in November, I've already gotten partnerships with IDES. I've already gotten partnership with the Elgin Community College. They have an apprentice program.
Okay.
So I was actually part of, I don't know if my excitement, but just the different opportunities out there. My VP of operations,
Yeah.
him and I, we went in November to Elgin Community College, and we listened to their presentation of their apprentice program
Mm.
for CNC machinists is, and find out about it, because with here I have to then present, and that'll be the first quarter of 26. That'll be taking the knowledge, reading over the apprentice contract, and then creating a presentation to the leadership saying, here, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to start this program up for the site, which then does give us that detailed mentor program,
Right.
because with them the mentor could change as the person learns skills.
Right.
And that, when you do that, you're actually paying for that associate to go to college. You're paying their tuition. So I'll do my presentation, explain why we want to spend X amount of money and how it's going to help benefit us. And, with tying in, there's things that I've looked at. Well, where are we at for our population for age? How many employees do we have that are 55 and older?
Right.
And that transfer of knowledge in the next 5 to 10 years, it's got to go somewhere. Because
Right.
when that person retires, if we haven't mentored someone up for that,
You
they're
see that
taking
happen
that.
a lot too in manufacturing. You get
Yeah.
40-year employees and then and then it tends to be like a whole class goes, and
Yes.
then all that knowledge goes with it.
Yeah.
It's tough to replace that.
Yeah.
So when we're
Yeah.
talking about leadership, what do you think, like, what leadership behavior quietly drives turnover? Is there any particular one that you see?
I I would say the one that would be, and I put this is what I thought about, is failing to acknowledge who put in the work that got you the outcome you presented. Because,
So not
the
giving
vice
credit where credit's due?
correct. The vice president is presenting how their region is doing,
Yeah.
or the director is presenting how, their
Yeah.
area is doing. but it's the other people below, unless that VP or direct, unless they physically did all that, giving credit to, hey, my team did this, these are the three standouts, and acknowledging it to the senior executives that hey, this person is they're the ones that are driving this, and
You
I
know,
would say
that's
failing to acknowledge, to say the thank you and acknowledging that person. Like, with one of the things that I love with where I'm here now, the VP of operations is like 15 to 20 feet from my office. And the two other company owners, there's three owners that own the three owners. The other two, their office is on the other side. And I can walk up to them and say, "Hey, how's everything going?" And or I could, my apprentice program that I want to do, I'm
yeah,
kind of like breadcrumbs. I mentioned it a little bit. I mentioned it a little bit. I got
smart.
the VP to go with me. So that way then when I actually present and be able to explain the whole process, they're going to be on that yes. So I think it's that, it's just something that I've seen.
It's a you know what, I have to tell you, that's very insightful
Mhm.
because, as a third party recruiter, and maybe you even see it as a corporate recruiter, but definitely as a third party recruiter, people tell you why they're leaving a job. And they
Mhm.
don't hold back like they would in a regular interview, right? They tell you,
Yeah. Oh yeah,
right?
for yep.
So they'll be like they'll spend some times, which I don't hold it against them. I want them to tell me
Yeah.
how they feel, right? So, a lot of the things that they get upset about is acknowledgement, or I had this idea and somebody stole it, or this guy didn't give me credit, and you're
Right?
right. It kind of does erode a culture if you're not recognizing people, because the VP is not doing it alone.
No.
Hello, of course.
Yeah.
And so people love to be recognized for what they do. They want to be seen and they want to
Mhm.
be heard.
Mhm.
And I think that's a really insightful thing, because when I think about it, of all the people I've spoken to in my career, which is I've interviewed over 12,000 people,
Mhm.
and that's definitely a pattern with that. People wanna feel good about it's kinda like the other thing that I see. There's 2 things that I see now that I'm looking at as we're kinda delving into this leadership, is when leaders don't keep their appointments with their people and they keep rescheduling them.
Mhm.
That is saying you're not a priority for me and you're not important. That's what it's saying. Secondly, is when they fail to do reviews on time,
Yeah.
because people wait. They wait to get into that review, hopefully because they're being going to be told they did a good job and they're going to get a raise and all that kind of stuff. But when people aren't prepared for it and they push it off, that's even worse than pushing off your regular appointments. But it's setting a precedence of saying that you're not important, and that will kill your culture and that will create turnover.
Yeah. And the review does not have to be a 4-page thing. Like, a review can be a 1 page. What are your 2 or 3 things you want to accomplish this year? What are the 2 or 3 things you accomplished last year? And what do you want to do? What do you want to do? One of the past places that I worked at, one of the things was, what are 2 things that you want to work on in the next year?
Yeah,
And
it doesn't have to count.
you
But
know,
it's the behavior of
yeah.
not
Mhm.
keeping the commitment to the
Yep.
appointment. That's the
Mhm.
thing. And people say, "Well,
Yeah.
I was busy, I do this." No, I always tell managers, when you have that appointment, look at it as like going to a family funeral. It's
Mhm.
not option to reschedule it. It just isn't an option. It's not an option. You don't reschedule it. That's just it. I'm not available. Well, if a client needs me, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to do it at 2 o'clock. I can't do it at 1 o'clock.
Mhm.
You just don't reschedule it. If people would understand, you know what, when you, it's about walking in other people's shoes, right? Don't forget how you feel if it was done to you. I mean, it's the same old kind of discussion with that.
And I would say with that too, it's the scheduling piece. Using the tools, the Outlook calendar,
Yeah, it's
using the
not that
schedule
hard. Come
assistant.
on. If
You
you're a
know,
manager,
I
you should be able to do it.
with regional level, I had to have my boss on, the plant manager on, I had to have the RVP on,
Yeah.
and I had to coordinate all of us for an invest to go over an investigation review. So you had to go in and do the schedule assistant and see when everybody, like, their time matched up. So if you're doing that piece and you put it on the calendar, I schedule myself. If there's
Yeah.
something that's a weekly reoccurring, I block out the 10-minute or the 20-minute time that it's going to be. So that way then come the end of the week, or whether it's an every Wednesday thing, It's using those resources. So when you have that meeting with the employee, you're not overbooked because you already when someone calls and say, "Hey, let's do that 1 o'clock," you can say, "No, I already have an appointment," without saying it's, with your employee. You can say, "I'm already booked at 1. I have to do 2 o'clock or 3:30."
I think they decide I think they reshuffle the priority. I think it has anything to do with forgetting. It's a reshuffle of
Yeah,
priority. That's what it is. So you are telling them you're not important because you just reshuffle their own priority. I mean, it does kill. So let me ask you this. What's an one HR myth that causes more damage than people realize?
this is my opinion. I'm
Bring
gonna say it's my
it
opinion.
on, Lynn.
I'm
Give me
giving
your opinion
I'm
on this.
giving my opinion. So that HR is the one who terminates and disciplines employees. If they're
You're like the nun. You're
here
like the
comes
nun with the
HR, who's
ruler.
getting fired today. I mean, those types of things. Now, purely my opinion, if you have that perception, and maybe that's a past perception because the past HR, and you're coming in new as a new person, and maybe there's a reason there was an opening, who knows, but
Yeah, yeah.
if that perception's going on, then in my opinion, HR's not doing their job with ensuring leadership is the management side of the business. I was taught long time ago, HR gives recommendations. We are meant to steer that manager down the correct pathway for the decision they want to make. So whether hey, you can't outrightly say no because it's age discrimination, or you can't
Yeah.
say no because they qualify for FMLA. So you're steering them down, and you say, okay, well, if you can't say no, here's your options A, B, or C. So that way, then, if they are then the manager and they are saying, nope, this is what I want to do, you've given them, here's your options, here's the legalese. And if it's something very major, I mean, I actually haven't at one time, I had to go to legal and say, I went to my boss and was like, hey, this manager's not listening. And,
Yeah.
they got a personalized call from legal, saying, but that's those types of things. HR is there to protect them, the company, and the employee. We're that neutral party on
Right.
both sides. So we're also there to make sure that they don't get themselves in trouble by doing
Right.
something they
It's
shouldn't.
your
Now,
compliance. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if
I
if
think what's
you're
interesting too
giving
is
them
people like HR doesn't fire anybody. You don't
mm,
I mean, unless it's your own HR person, but you're just part of the team that really has the guardrails
mhm.
to make sure that it's done correctly, to make sure there is cause, to make sure again that we're following legal and compliance. You're really not weighing in on with the ops guy. I mean, they're the ones that have to decide if the person's performing or not. I mean,
Well,
I
and
think
it
you could do a
depends.
really good job by asking the right questions and challenging the challenging them, like, "Did you do everything you can do to save this person? Have you looked at yourself to make sure they're
Yeah.
trained properly?" Right? Like, you need to have them think about what their responsibility is for the problem, not just the employee's the problem, right?
Well, and that's
That's
that partnership.
yeah,
Over the
absolutely.
years, like, it didn't matter the company. Before there was an involuntary termination. Now, voluntary people, no call, no show, yes, I terminate. I process them we process them in the system. But the involuntary terminations, those are ones that my managers all over all the different industries, they knew that before they told the person they were termed, that they had to partner with me first. And
Oh, yeah.
I've been one where I've written the termination discipline.
Yeah,
I've made sure that it's had the appropriate information. I've sent it to the manager. You get into any kind of investigations, yeah,
right,
I would do the closure call with the employee. Hey, we're talking, we're going through, and I let them know, hey, this is the closeout of the issue. But then I would do like 2/3 of it, but then the manager would take over, and I would tell them, well, now, the manager's going to talk to you, and they're going to give you the outcome of the decision.
right,
And I think that might be the piece that maybe, if as HR you're sitting and the manager isn't doing that piece, or isn't comfortable, then you do some role playing in that up front. And yeah, I would email them if they needed a copy of their termination discipline. I was sitting there in that. The key thing is I was in that meeting with the manager to support them. And if it was tied to an issue with an investigation, the employee already knows that I talked to them. I got their side of the story.
Right.
They had this wasn't a time of argument or things like that. We did all that at the beginning of, the investigation side. So, it's,
Yeah.
managers delivering the message.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question.
Mhm.
How much discrimination have you seen in your career in any form? Have you seen it much?
Seen it nearly as much as maybe some other people, but I've established over the years it won't be tolerated from any level. The coworker level. I mean, with all the different training and the anti-harassment, anti-discrimination training that we have to do on a yearly basis. I'm talking to doing the presentation with the employees, and I'm letting them know, look, the language out on the street stays on the streets. When you come through the door, you're going to treat everybody respectfully, and that's just how it is. And
Mhm.
we meant it, we said it, we
Yeah.
upheld it. So I think it just all depends on the culture, and does management, when you
Yeah.
have an issue, are you addressing it? And a lot of that stuff does not come up if you address it at the very beginning with,
Yeah.
we won't tolerate,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, there's always gonna be a subconscious bias or subconscious discrimination you're not gonna be able to nip,
Yeah.
back in the day, and I'm older than you, so back in the day, you would see it a lot more blatantly than you do now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, maybe it's lingering underneath and they're just smarter at doing it, but in the past, like, this is maybe 20 years ago, I've had people say, "I really need a man in this position," or, "I'd prefer to hire a guy than a girl because the girls cry," or the stuff that I've heard, or,
Yeah.
I mean, or I don't wanna hire
Yeah.
somebody over. I don't want an old person in this role, like, and so I would always say, "I'm gonna present you the most qualified person.
Mhm.
That's what my job is. I'm gonna
Yeah.
present you the most qualified person for this role, regardless of sex, color, religion." And
And
so I can't control whether you're gonna hire the person or not, but I'm just gonna present the best person for the job, and that's what I used to say to them, right?
yeah, and you know what? You know what there is now instead of that, and it's really, I don't know if you'd
Hmm,
go down saying it's discrimination, is a manager will look at a resume, and if it's got the city for the address, oh, well, that's an hour drive away.
that's been
That's too
around since
far.
the dawn of time, but they say
Yeah.
you can't do that anymore, right?
No,
That's
for
considered
myself,
discrimination.
my resume does not have my city, state, zip, none of that on it. It's got my LinkedIn
Like, can
profile,
you
it's got my
legally ask people
email,
where
the
they
phone
live in?
number.
I just heard about that one where you can't now, look, like, this is interesting, right? Because I think about what just happened was we probably violated a law doing this. I'm not gonna talk about the thing, but we had a situation where somebody was driving along, like, a pretty good distance, like an
Mhm.
hour, 15 hour and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah.
And, asked this guy 5 ways a Sunday, like, "Are you okay with this? Can you think you can do this? This is a lot." Really think I don't think that's illegal for me to say that. I mean, I'm
No.
the recruiter anyway. If you
No.
really think about it. But then, the hiring manager knew it too,
Mhm.
and he hired him, so it wasn't that he hired him, but I remember having this conversation with the company saying, like, "If he falls off in 4 months or, like, please don't hold it against me. I can't change this," But, I mean, but people do leave jobs because the commute's too long.
It can be, but that's also one I would say is you just don't go off of, oh, well, that town is so far, because you don't know the underlying thing. I had one of our managers that we hired, they were in a different state, and he was looking to get back to Illinois and was applying for a position. You don't know. I mean, I've done that myself. When I
Well,
was out
yeah, I
on the
mean,
East
but the thing
Coast, I
is,
was
like,
living at my aunt's house
you
and
guys
I was
can't get
looking for,
but you guys can't have that conversation. You can't say, "Look, you're living in Indiana," or something like, "Oh, you're in Michigan, but the job's in Chicago. We're not gonna pay for relocation. How are you gonna get to the job the first couple of weeks before you decide to move? What are you gonna do?" You can't have that conversation? That's illegal?
I would confirm with the with Neil, but I would go over with them, well, this is where the position is. This is what the expectation is. Are you able are you able to maintain that?
So, yeah, it's more like, can you reliably get to this location?
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, part of the thing, okay, and this is just from me being in the front lines, Lynn, for
Yeah.
so many years, and people really telling you why they leave. Like they won't tell you when they go
Yeah.
they interview with you in a company, they're going to give you a very distilled version. They're not going to really tell you. Well, let me just tell you something. Commute is usually the top 3 things that people look at when they decide to take a position. It usually always hits the top 3. Okay.
Yeah.
In some combination. It's usually never the 4th or 5th important thing. It's usually where's it located? How long does it take me to get there? Or is it remote or is it hybrid or whatever the case may be? Right now, it got more complicated because now you have like different work schedules for professionals, but it's like a real thing. So when I recruit, I talk about like, here's where it's located. How does it work for you? Do you feel good about this? And sometimes you can see patterns, like you see where people are used to being longer commutes. But
Yeah.
then you see people who've always had a 10 or 15-minute or 20-minute commute, and then they're looking for something for an hour, and that makes me nervous. Experienced it, right? Like they don't know day in, day out that or some people will say, well, if it's paying this, I'll take it. I'll take it even though it's longer. And I'm like, look, man, after 6 months, the money luster wears off. If you
Yeah.
hate driving, the
Yeah.
money doesn't matter anymore. So like from a third party recruiter, I probably can say things that you guys can't. There's probably an
Yeah,
advantage
because
to
like,
having a third.
we can't ask them, do they have a car? Do they ride a bicycle? We
And
can't
I
ask
think
that
that's
stuff.
ridiculous.
So,
I think
yeah.
that's stupid. I think it's kind of stupid. I disagree with the law. I'm just going to put it out there because, and it's not so much because you should discriminate against it. I think the thing is you should be able to have that conversation because you're also doing a disservice to them,
Yeah.
right? Like for instance, I'll give you a quick thing
Yeah.
before, right? Can be a
Yeah.
nightmare with traffic.
Oh, definitely.
So someone will go and be like, "Oh, well, it's not that far. It's only 30 miles." I'd be like, "Yeah, it's 30 miles or 25 miles. What is it gonna take you an hour and a half? Because you have all this traffic, like, is it okay with you? Is it gonna get you stressed out? Do you really wanna do this?" I think you're doing a disservice to somebody by not challenging it, and not just for
So,
yourself, but
yeah.
for the person. Or someone will tell me, "I'm gonna be back at 6 o'clock to pick up my child," and I'll be like, "I don't know how you're gonna get back." Like,
So that's the challenge then when you have that and they're telling you that, I would say then, okay, you know what? You get with the operations person because operations saying, well, that's kind of far, and you're like, well, they're good with it. So then the challenge then would be, okay, you know what? They need the shift, their schedule shift starts at 7 a.m. in the morning. You schedule that interview for 7 a.m. so that they experience the
that's
rush
what I
hour
do.
traffic
That's
and they
exactly what I do.
yeah,
Yeah, I do too. I
because
do that.
then they're gonna
I say it like, "Let's do a Monday morning. I hope
yep,
it's raining out too,
yeah,
and let's do." Yeah, that's you know
yep,
what, Lynn, you and I are the same, but let you experience, how did you feel about that once
yeah.
you did that commute? Because 'Cause you're
Yeah,
not really.
or you do a 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so that way then when they're done with the interview, they're driving home at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the rush hour because if their shift, for salaried
Yeah,
managers, if their
yeah,
shift is gonna be 7 to
yeah,
7,
yeah,
or 7 to
yeah.
5, then they
But I
experience
but I have witnessed people who make an assumption based on their okay, this is what I call people bringing baggage into the interview process. They had a one employee 15
Mhm.
years ago who lived far away, and they had to fire the person, like, one time.
Yeah,
That to me is when you're making a blanket decision of, "I won't look at anybody." I think that discrimination, I think that's ridiculous.
yeah,
Right? But I think having a conversation about it is in the
yep,
best interest of that person because them either getting fired or them having to switch a job isn't helping them any. You know what I
no.
mean?
And that I
Either.
think that goes to the leadership being open to consider, I call it transferable skills.
Yeah.
What does that person bring to the table that transfers over to your industry? I'm a perfect example. I've had big box retail, I've had distribution, I've had
Yeah.
manufacturing, I've had armor car industry. HR is HR. FLA,
Right.
FLSA, FMLA,
Yeah.
all the alphabet.
Yeah.
It's how it so it doesn't
I got you.
matter
Yeah.
the industry. HR is HR. Now, how do you apply based off the company
Yeah.
policies? But I think that thing when you get down into the operation side is them being open to candidates, and I'm going to say as low as 50 to 60% of the job description, because finding someone now in the candidate pool that meets 90% that's an unattainable goal. It's unrealistic. If
In
you find
what
someone,
area, Lynn? In what
it could be you want an operations manager, so you want them to know, say, plastics. You want them to know manufacturing. They have to have a green belt certification, or they have to have an engineering degree. You start
yeah, all
you
these
make those
stipulations, yeah.
requirements so many
There's like 2
that when
people in the area.
yeah. So, you could teach, okay, now maybe there is a difference, plastics versus rubber versus, but it's that piece of manufacturing. So if they can bring the transferable skills. So I'll give an example. You need someone with stand-up reach truck experience, your distribution person, your distribution company, and you say they have to have 6 months stand-up reach truck. Well, you're manufacturing, but you get 5 candidates from a distribution background that they use electric pallet jack, they use a forklift, they use a stand up, a sit down, so, and they have the skills of that stand up reach truck. Why would you not interview them? Or why would you say, well, it's distribution, it's not manufacturing?
Yeah,
If that's one of those key skills that you need for your area, why wouldn't you? I mean, I would be like, well, that's a great time to maybe teach them
yeah,
the
yeah,
manufacturing piece, because if
yeah,
stand up reach truck is a requirement for your area, or
yeah.
pallet jack,
Or they'll hold on to those 10 out of 10s that they need on the checklist,
Mhm.
and they'll get a subpar candidate where they could get a better candidate if they let go of 1 or 2 of them. That's the thing
Yes.
that right? For, like, say, other reasons, for something, like someone who's hopping around a lot or something. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I'm the same way. I mean, when I talk to a hiring company and they want 10 out of 10 things, I always go like, "Go talk to Santa Claus." I
Well, and
mean,
the other thing too is if they say, well, I need to have a minimum 3 candidates. I won't To make a decision, they
yeah,
need to see more
oh, you
candidates,
mean yeah, the compare and contrast
or they
argument? I say,
yeah.
compare them to your best hire you've ever had in your career. That's what I say. That is ridiculous that you need to compare and contrast in the same time
Mhm.
frame for you to make a decision. You
Yeah.
should know a good person when you meet them if you've hired before.
Yep, and candidates aren't gonna stay around that long.
No,
You
it's
know,
just
they're
no.
they're applying to the next position. They're
I got things to do,
you
man.
take 2 weeks to 3 weeks to make a yes
Yeah,
or no,
yeah,
then they're gonna see if that's how you value them during the interview process, then it's gonna be, well, that's how you would value them as an employee. So who's to
yeah,
say that they would even be interested,
right.
by the time the hiring manager makes a decision?
Yeah, right. Well, I have kept you longer than I said I would. So
You
awesome. Thank you. I'm so
Thank
glad
you.
that we've met, and thank you for being in the hiring room. Is there anything
You're
else you wanna
welcome.
say?
I think I've said everything we've got time for.
I
Thank you for
do. We could
inviting
talk
me,
all day, but
Renee.
I really appreciate taking the time out. I think, we'll definitely be in touch. Thanks for joining me in the hiring room. If you like the podcast, please subscribe below and share this episode with someone you think that would benefit from it. We're always looking for good people to interview. So if you have a referral, comment below, or you can email me at renee@mseedinc.com. Thanks till next time.